the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love.
And what are some of the things that you've really run out of time? And we've got to talk about your latest. I want to go back a little bit, first of all, and celebrate a true legend.
Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work.
And did you pursue performing opportunities while you were in high school?
Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day, and happy whatever it is you're celebrating today. What are you celebrating? Who are you celebrating? Welcome to my show. My show is all about celebrating life, celebrating art, celebrating artists, celebrating whatever there is to celebrate. And I do believe there is a lot to celebrate. Today is also International Book Giving Day. I'd like to recommend a few books. Here is Freda Payne's great book, Band of Gold. She's been on this show. Also, Sweet Oddball about Alice Pierce, Frederick Tucker. And of course, darling, look at this, Harvey Savinson. And Harvey Savinson has been on this show. And what does Harvey Savinson have in common with today's guest? That, of course, is Alan Eichler. And I am so glad that he is here on this show today, because this man is always worth celebrating. And it's true, Alan, you keep all of us entertained. Thank you for your YouTube channel and for all that you do, because you have this incredible love of what show business, in my opinion, used to be all about. I celebrate today's world of show business, but let's face it, there was something about the world of entertainment that you and I both grew up as young boys, dreamed of being a part of. And thank God, both of us were able to be a part of it on many, many levels. You, even deeper than I even got to be a part of. And we're going to celebrate that today. And I want to ask you, as we delve into this world, you're my Valentine today. So what are you celebrating today, Alan?
I guess the fact that I'm here. I lost a very close friend last week, Carlton Carpenter.
Yes.
And I was back in New York for memorial service, and also I'm his executor, so I was winding up things, about his estate. Anyway, I'm home, and everything's good here in LA, and I'm happy to be with you.
Well,
You're my Valentine.
Well, let's talk about Carlton for a moment. Do you mind if we start with Carlton?
Sure.
Because I lost a very dear friend on the 4th of December, and I am the executor of her estate as well. And it's not an easy job. And I will say this, I didn't even realize that there was a memorial for Carlton last week. And I'm sorry that I didn't know that there was, but I was lucky enough to go to Carlton's home and interview him for my Dolly project, which is on hold now. And I hope to bring it back to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Dolly. But I was able to interview Carlton about his involvement with Dolly, as we'll talk about your involvement as well. But being in his home and seeing his memorabilia and everything, all I can say is, Alan, you have your hands full.
I know. I stayed at the house, and from the front door all the way to the back and downstairs in the basement are just boxes and boxes and boxes. I think he saved every piece of paper he ever had in his life. And he's got posters for every summer stock production. I mean, you don't see summer stock posters, and nobody saves those. He's got all of his summer stock shows, all, of course, the Broadway and off Broadway and touring and everything else. But there's so much memorabilia, and on his mantle was a picture. It's still there. Is a picture of the Reagans coming to see Dolly and being greeted backstage with Mary Martin and Carlton and other people from the cast. And it's autographed by both Ronald Reagan and Nancy to him. And that was one of his treasures. Not because of the Reagans necessarily, but because of Mary and the whole production.
And of course, tragically, I mean, he traveled literally around the world with the production. And just before the show was scheduled to open in London,
Right.
that tragic accident, and had to leave the production, even though he valiantly tried to go on. Gower and David Merrick and he wanted to do it, but it was too much of a risk for the producers to let him go on and continue. But he had that thing that you and I and so many people who are watching tonight have, and that is such a love for this business. And I want to ask you, where do you feel that that love for this business began for you? I know in my research on you, and you and I have spoken before, when I interviewed you years ago, it began for you as a kid watching old, now we call them kinescopes and everything, but watching television and seeing these great artists in your home before you got to know them and work with them. But where did that love come from for you?
It's hard to say. It started very early. My grandfather had a record store, a music store. It was actually a full music store with instruments and sheet music and everything else, and records, of course. And he would bring records home. I had a cousin who was raised by my grandmother, our grandmother, and they lived in our building, and he was acting and dancing and in some Broadway shows. And my grandmother was kind of a stage grandmother. And she even dragged me to an audition for Auntie Mame when I was a kid. And I was there with all these redheads, Anyway, I never wanted to be an actor. I didn't think I don't know. I'd done a few things in school, but I knew that wasn't, my calling. But I loved the business, and I loved individual stars. Like you said, back then we had the Ed Sullivan Show, and he always had the current stars, but he would always drag out an old timer like Blossom Seeley or Harry Richmond, of course Sophie Tucker. And neither of my parents had anything to do with show business. They had no connections at all, but they used to talk about the great stars they had seen. My mother would talk about Helen Morgan. My father loved Belle Baker. He would talk about Belle Baker all the time, who I'd never seen or heard. It was just whatever he told me about her. Since then, of course, I've heard her recordings. And that we would sit every Sunday night and watch Ed Sullivan. I think that was the start. And I started collecting records very early, thanks to my grandfather. And the one that always stood out for me as a kid, now I'm talking like 5 or 6 years old, was Patti Page. And I became a huge fan, had scrapbooks, paper dolls, coloring books, anything that had her name on them. My parents put up with the paper dolls.
Well, my parents did too.
I didn't play with the
funny
paper dolls.
because and you and I again shared something in common. I had this cassette tape recorder, and I used to sit in front of my TV recording everything that I would record everything, because we didn't have the luxury of DVRs or things being repeated or anything.
Right.
The difference between you and myself, however, was that I would record everything, I would memorize it, and then I would act everything out on the front steps of our high school.
Okay. Well, you were a performer and an actor. And I'm older than you, so I had reel-to-reel tape. And I was able to figure out a way to hook it up to the TV. And I would record the audio of things, audio of movies. I recorded whole movies, just the audio, just the sound. Of course, I never listened to them, but I had, I would record everything. In 1957, Patti Page had an hour-long TV show on CBS, and I knew that her manager had an office, and in my mind, I was 12 years old. I thought of it as being her office, and I found out, I was able to track down the address. This is what made me different from just an average fan. I actually got to her. I figured out the address to the office. I went there. It was in Rockefeller Center. And I took the elevators up to the 12th floor. There were banks of elevators. I got up to the 12th floor, and the elevator doors opened, and across from me, getting onto the elevator opposite me, was Patti Page in a full-length mink coat and full makeup. Now, what are the odds of that? And it was just long enough, and then her doors closed as mine opened. It was just long enough for me to see her. And it's mind-boggling. And then I went into the office, and they gave me tickets, and I started going every week. I'll make it short. I got to know her. I got to have my own seats every week. I didn't have to stand on line with the audience. And I was also allowed, this is what's unusual, they had a live dress rehearsal. This was the last year of live TV. They had a live dress rehearsal from 5 to 6, and I was allowed, with no audience, I was allowed to come to the dress rehearsal, roam around the seating area, and the stars who were rehearsing would come, and they'd come down to where the seats were, waiting to go on or whatever. And I got to meet all of these stars, and I could go up to any of them and talk to them or get their autographs. One of them was Carol Channing, and the show was called The Big Record. Carol was a guest one of the weeks that I was there, and I remember going up and talking to her. She had her Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend dress on, and Carol, as well as several of the other people that were, I guess, on various shows, and it turned out to be clients of mine when I was older. I had no idea I was going to be a press agent. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got older. I never thought about it. I loved show business, but I didn't know about press agents. I didn't know where I fit in. But so many of those people, Johnnie Ray, Jerry Southern, the DeCastro sisters, Carol, of course, were all people that I worked with later. Georgia Gibbs, I didn't know I'd see these people again in years later. Florence Henderson, I still have the autograph I got from Florence. Julie Andrews. I mean, it was amazing, and that also gave me a feeling for being comfortable with celebrities, rather than just being stage struck. Well, I was stage struck, but I mean, I got used to talking to celebrities face to face. And on Fridays, that was on Wednesdays. On Fridays, I would go up to Patti's office and help answer the fan mail. And sometimes she would be there. She'd come in, and we would just sit together in her office, going through the fan mail. I remember once she smoked back then. And I remember lighting her cigarette, and I was so nervous, my hand was shaking. Now, 50 years later, I did publicity for her Carnegie Hall concert and helped her get a Grammy Award for the live recording.
Wow.
Almost 50 years later. It was her 50th anniversary, but she had started earlier. She recorded the Carnegie Hall show in 1997. I got Hugh Forden at DRG, who was a friend of mine, to put it out, and she won her first Grammy it was presented in 1999, after having recorded since the 40s. It was really mind-boggling. So that was like a complete turn of events. Carol, I started working with in 1982, and when she was was one of her revivals of Dolly. And we became close friends, as well as with Charles. Charles really taught me so much. He gets knocked a lot.
Let's talk about that for a moment. And I'm glad that you bring this up. But do you mind if I go back for a moment before we get to Charles?
Sure.
I want to ask you, because when you mentioned that you went into Rockefeller Center, you see Patti Page, and then all of a sudden you are now coming into the studio and you're seeing the shows. What was it, do you feel, that gave you entree, that allowed you to be able to come into the studio week after week after week? They trusted you, obviously. They brought you into the studio. What was it about you, Alan, that allowed that to happen? How did you make that happen? Because you obviously created that in your life.
It's hard to say. They trusted me, obviously. I think Patti actually liked me. I was young. I was, cute. It's hard for me to evaluate myself, but I see pictures. I see pictures of myself at that age, and I think Patti genuinely liked me. Obviously, she had to have liked me, and because she hired me years later to be her press agent. And her manager, Jack Rail, liked me, and because I was the only one. There were like a dozen fans. The others were all girls. I was the only boy, so I stood out that way, I guess. I was the only boy, but I was also the only one that went to the dress rehearsals. The girls just came for the show. So you're right. I never really thought about it before.
Well,
but I guess she liked me. That's really the basic, the main reason.
So Charles Lowe, and I am with you on this. I met Charles a few times early on in my career when I was performing as Carol, and he was always very kind to me. He was always thankful for me for being respectful of Carol in my performance, and I've got my own theory about. There are two sides to the faction, and everybody has their the sides that they go to. And I have remained neutral because I was not privy to that. Although I have my theories, he has gotten short shrift, and I think it's because of the circumstances that surrounded him. And I think that Carol, in my opinion, was given very bad advice by some hangers-honors, if that's the right word. But you were there. So if you can let us know from your perspective what was going on at that time.
Sure. First of all, the first time I ever saw Charles was when I first started working for Harvey Sabinson and Lee Salters back in '63, the fall of '63, in the mailroom. I was 19. And Charles used to come up to the office every week or two, and he stormed the bombastic Charles Lowe. He'd come storming into the office with his briefcase, always with his briefcase under his arm, and straight into Lee Salter's office. He dealt mainly with Lee and sometimes Harvey. Harvey, if it was about the shows, but for Carol as a personality, it was Lee. And I was always impressed by him. Just his manner and the swagger, the way he would come in with the briefcase. I always remember the briefcase. I didn't actually he didn't deal with the underlings, only Charles or Harvey. Only Lee, or Harvey. I didn't meet him until '82 when I had moved to Los Angeles and I was doing press for Dolly. And he took a liking to me, and Carol did also, and I liked them. And I continued for the next 20 years being very close to them. I wasn't their press agent. They still had Lee. But I did things with them. I socialized with them. Every Sunday, Carol wanted to learn how to use her VCR. So every Sunday, I would go up to the house and we'd be in the bedroom. That's where the TV was. And they'd be in bed, cuddling with each other. She called him daddy and he called her baby. And we'd watch all the Sunday morning political shows because they were very into politics. And then I'd give her a lesson on learning the timer, and she liked to record things like Barbara Walters or other things so that when she saw them, in person, she could discuss with them what she had just seen on TV. So I did that for like a year or two, but I was also, with them all the time. She loved to see people imitating her, impersonating her. We went to a drag show one time with Charles and Carol and Betty White. So I guess I was kind of Betty White's date. And we went to the Tiffany so she could see a female impersonator impersonate. What do you call yourself, an actor? Charles Pierce always wanted to be an actor, and Jim Bailey also. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Charles began in the age of ballyhoo. He was Amy Semple McPherson's front man. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that. Advanced man.
Yes.
He would go to the next town and stir up all this interest in her show that was going to be coming to town. And that made a big impression on me as a press agent, because I love ballyhoo. When I was a kid, I used to love going to freak shows. I loved the Barkers in Coney Island. That kind of always appealed to me. And so people that went ahead of tent shows, that was a different kind of show business, but it was the beginnings of what Broadway press agents became later. When I was with him alone or with Carol, he wasn't that, I'll use the word bombastic again, because that's kind of what people think of him, running down the aisle applauding for Carol. That's the image that people have. But privately, he was just a normal person, and he was very intelligent, and he would joke about some of the things he did. He taught me how to start a standing ovation. We sat in the first row at Legends, and he showed me we could stand up and make the whole audience stand up, which was an amazing feeling. I loved him. I just loved him. And the two of them were very, very devoted. They slept together in one bed, despite all the talk. They slept together in one bed every night. They easily could have slept in separate beds or separate rooms, but they were always in one bed, even on tour. They slept together. So all that stuff that was said at the time that she left him was not true. I was also very close to Wally Sewell, whose house they lived in. Mm-hmm. Charles, they were partners. It was Charles Lowe Productions, but Carol was 50% of Charles Lowe Productions. So there wasn't any way he stole money or took money. That was all just made up. And he was Carol Channing. Carol was his life. That's all he lived and breathed, Carol Channing. And the two of them together treated Carol's career like a product. Mm-hmm. They'd sit and watch that. They had me taping everything too. That was one of the other things I did, archiving her videos. They'd sit together in the bedroom and watch her clips. And I'm really talking the intimate stuff now, but they'd watch the clips and they would talk about which wig they liked best. Mm. I remember one time Carol saying, "Do you like these teeth or the other teeth?" I don't think she meant dentures, probably caps.
Yes.
But they would do this objectively. Like Carol was another person. Like Carol Channing was an object that they were selling. So they were marketing a product. That's really what it was, and they took it very seriously. And Carol worked very hard. She anytime she had to speak somewhere, she'd memorize her speech and rehearse it. And very often I was the audience. So, we'd sit there in the bedroom. We did everything in the bedroom. We'd sit there and she'd do the speech for me and, want my reaction to it. Mm-hmm. And just amazing things. I mean, they were totally devoted until he had a stroke. And The first night he had a stroke, she actually slept in his hospital room with him, and she wouldn't leave his side. Then, well, I'll be quite honest. You said it was hangers-on. It was actually her son. Her son came from Florida and turned her head around and brought her back to Florida with him. And that's when all those horrible stories were released. Charles was brokenhearted and devastated. I think it led to his passing, quite honestly. And I'm not blaming Carol, because I don't think she realized what was happening. And I blame her son, Chan. It was really Chan's doing. And, you know, she had, I hope I'm not talking out of school, but you're the only one listening.
I'm the only one. No one else is listening right now.
Carol told me herself, and Charles told me. Chan was from her previous husband. And this is in the 50s. And Carol was still building her career, you know, and she didn't have time to be a mother. Not that she didn't love him, but I mean, you know, she was busy, just like Mary Martin with Larry Hagman. You know, they had to take care of their careers. She left Chan with her former husband's parents.
That's right.
I think in Canada. And she met Charles, who became her manager, and then eventually they married. And Charles made it a condition, when they got married, Charles made it a condition of their marriage that she go and get Chan and bring him back. And Charles adopted him. So that's why he's Channing Low. Charles adopted him and raised him. And it was all his doing, because Carol might easily have left him in Canada with her in-laws. So for Chan, and he raised Chan. So for Chan to then turn on him, I don't want to make this a whole anti-Channing Low.
No, it was just a very sad, you know, end to a 46-year marriage. You know, I believe firmly, and we'll move on, is that if Charles had died suddenly, it would have been a completely different story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's what it was.
That's my theory.
I had to take, this is kind of a funny story. Right after all this happened, I was home alone. I was home with someone who later became my partner, actually. But the phone rang, and it was Barbara Walters. And I had a 2-line phone at that time because I worked from home. So it was Barbara Walters. I have no idea to this day how she got my number or why she thought to call me, of all people that she could have called. But she called me because she wanted me to tell her what I knew, you know, about Carol leaving Charles, the whole episode. So we were talking, and you know, I'd never met Barbara Walters. I mean, it was just so weird. So we were talking, and my other line rang, and I said, "Barbara, can you hold on for a minute?" So I put her on hold, and I answered the other phone. It was Betty White, wanting to know what I knew. And again, I don't know how she had my number. So I said, "Betty, I'll call you back." And I went back to Barbara Walters. I told this story to my brother, and he said, "You put Barbara Walters on hold."
God bless both of them. Well, I'm going to go back. We're going to go back for a moment.
Okay.
You started out as an apprentice, working for Lee Solters and Harvey Sabinson.
Right.
How did that begin for you? How did you get into that office?
I had no connections. I was going to be an English teacher, and I had done 2 years of community college, and I had been accepted to a state teachers college in New York, and I was this was like in August. I was getting ready to go. And my brother, who since passed away, but my brother was always interested in theater also. He and I used to go to shows together, matinees and everything, and wait for the star to come out. And he brought home a book that was titled something like "So You Want to Be in the Theater," and it had a chapter on every profession in the theater. Because I had always thought, I'm not an actor, I didn't know what else there was. And there was a chapter on press agents, and the last line in the book was, if you love the theater and you're good in English, then being a theatrical press agent, it could be the answer to your dream. And it was like a light bulb went on. So it was like, I'll be a press agent. I'll be a theatrical press agent. So I went through all my old playbills and the yellow pages and made a list of all the press agents that were listed. And most of them were in the theater district. So it was easy to go into New York. I was living on Long Island then. It was easy to go into Manhattan and into the 40s and just walk from office to office. And they were all different. Some a lot of the old theaters had offices upstairs, behind the theater. And the press agents would be like one or two people, in a room. Then there were larger offices. And one of the ones that I went to was Lou Harmon and Saul Jacobson and Lou Harmon, who were hot right then at that time with Fiddler on the Roof. And Louis Harmon was the husband of the woman who had written that book, which was, ironic. They didn't need anybody, but they told me about the Salters. It was at that time it was Salters, O'Rourke, and Stevenson, which was a large office, and they said maybe they can use you, and they sent me over there. And they interviewed me, and they hired me for the mailroom, $55 a week. But they hired me knowing that I wanted to eventually, move up to being a press agent. But I had to learn, of course. Mm-hmm. So that was my college. I always think of that as my college. Those 5 years, I went from the mailroom to being a senior publicist with an assistant and a secretary. And I was handling about 11 accounts when I left. And they handled everything. I mean, when I left, I was handling the Rolling Stones and Dorothy, Lamour, and Ella Dolly at the same time. Hollywood Palace, the Bob Hope Show, Jimmy Dean Show, Jane Morgan, who was popular back then, Edie Adams. It was a very Paul Anka. I had Paul Anka and Bobby Vinton. He gave me all the rock and roll stuff because I was young, but I was more interested in Dorothy Lamour.
Well, let's talk about Dorothy Lamour. And I've also done a lot of research on that production. She regretted that she didn't make it to Broadway as Dolly. And
I'm sure.
And I read that the closest she came, she performed in Lambertville, in very close to New York, in a tent. And David Merrick was scheduled to come. And the night that he was scheduled to come see her was a huge, like a monsoon almost. And she was so devastated that he didn't make it that night. And that was her hope that was going to get her. I had interviewed several people from that production. But what I read about her was her generosity of spirit in terms of the way she treated everyone in that company, her and her husband, and the way they traveled with everyone. Can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah, Dorothy, I was handling Hollywood Palace, as I said, and but I was doing it out of New York, and the show was taped in Los Angeles. So I was doing a lot of press releases and stuff, but I didn't have access to most of the guest stars because they were on the West Coast. Excuse me. Dorothy lived in Baltimore at that time, and she was basically retired. I mean, she would come out and do something once in a while, but she was living in Baltimore. And her two sons were raised, and she was very devoted to her husband, Bill. They were very devoted to each other. But I contacted her to see if she was willing to do some interviews for the show and about the show. And so that's how we started just on the phone. We became good friends on the phone. She didn't have an agent, she didn't have anything. So I knew Tom Corman, who was a theatrical agent, and I put them together. I had her contact him. He was interested in representing her. So she contacted him, and he got her the Dolly tour. It started with they tested her out with a week in Louisville. There was a week that Carol couldn't do in Louisville. So that was how they broke her in, with a blonde wig at that time.
Yes.
And there are still photographs of her.
I've seen the photographs. Yes.
Then Ginger Rogers was on tour, and she was scheduled to do Las Vegas, but they were doing 14 shows a week, 2 a night, and she refused to do any more than 8. So they had Dorothy go out to Vegas, and the show had 2 dollies with the same cast, 1 cast and 2 dollies. And Ginger, of course, took the shows that she wanted, the time slots that she wanted. But Dorothy did the other 6 with a brunette wig. She became the first brunette dolly.
Right.
And
God bless Ann Russell. Ann Russell understudied all of them, both of them.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
I think Ann Russell understudied Dorothy at one point. I think maybe in Louisville.
Yeah.
Because I talk about her. So anyway, became very close. She hired my office, but I did the work. But she retained us to do her personal publicity as well. I went out to Vegas for the opening, which was exciting. And she was very warm. She wasn't like a star. She was just a regular person. She was very conscious of her career and everything she had done, but she treated everybody equally. It wasn't, she didn't play star, to people. And was very warm. When we were in Vegas, we were together constantly. We had all our meals together and everything. And I remember one day I was walking through the casino, or I was walking somewhere in the hotel. It was the Riviera. And somebody said that my mother was looking for me. And of course, they meant Dorothy.
I want to ask you, with all of the hats that you've worn, and I mean, you've been a producer and you've managed and press agent, which of those hats do you feel that you wore the most comfortably?
I guess producing in the I was never good at money raising, that part of producing. So somebody else had to always be the money person. I'm not good at asking for money or raising money. But I liked. It's not just a matter. It's hard to put a title on it. Geraldine Fitzgerald said to me one time that when I was working with her in her show Streetsongs, she said, "You shouldn't be a press agent. You should be a producer." Because I guess in Hollywood, in the old studio system, press agents were lower, or producers. Anyway, I liked doing. It's how I got into managing. I didn't want to just be a press agent who sends out press releases. I liked creating the event and then promoting it. And kind of doing it all, kind of putting it all together and then promoting it, rather than just, like I said, typing press releases. I like doing the whole package. And so you can label it management or producing, whatever,
Well, I want to talk about something that, it's interesting because I wanted to talk about advocacy, which is a word that popped up for me this morning. And then this news item broke today, and I think it's so apropos. I'm going to bring up a photograph here,
Okay.
and look at this. Because these 2 women, Vivian Blaine here, who would have been 100 this year,
Yes.
but they were responsible for the first big AIDS benefit And I think that you were responsible for producing that. If you can tell us about that.
Yes, back in 1983, I was doing publicity for Women Behind Bars, a Tom Eyen play. Tom Eyen wrote Dreamgirls. This was just before Dreamgirls, and it was well, actually, Dreamgirls had opened on Broadway, but this Women Behind Bars was written before it, which is what I meant. It was playing at the Roxy. A friend of mine named Larry Evans was what they called a VJ. He ran the videos at a bar called the Revolver in West Hollywood. And he told me that this is the very early days when nobody really knew too much about it. And he told me that a group of people had gotten together and they were trying to form an organization to raise money for AIDS, but they couldn't get any stars to do anything. And he wanted to know if I'd meet with their fundraiser, Max Drew, and I did. It was just like maybe a dozen people, and they had a little office in Hollywood, a little 2-room office. And Max explained, that he couldn't get any stars. Now, at that point, I'd never met anyone with AIDS. Larry Evans, who put me together with them, with APLA, became the first person I knew that had AIDS. And this was like later, and Max Drew later died of AIDS. So it was all very, very strange. But anyway, they were still healthy at this point. I was handling Women Behind Bars. They couldn't get any of the hot stars, and and when I say gay stars, I mean stars that had gay followings, like Bette Midler or Diana Ross or Barbra Streisand. None of them would do anything. Nobody wanted their name associated with the word AIDS because it was considered a dirty disease that only unsavory people got. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I've got Women Behind Bars running, which is Salute to B Movies. I had Vivian Blaine. I just met Mamie, and I knew some of the others, and I thought I'll make it a salute to those ladies. They have nothing to lose. Their careers are already kind of up in the air. So I contacted a whole bunch of them. I got a lot of turndowns. But I was able to get a really good group together. Sherry, I got Mamie, I had Vivian. I was working with Vivian on her cabaret act. We were putting a cabaret act together at that time. And I had just met Mamie because her agent wanted me to represent her for nightclubs and variety stuff. She had an acting agent, but the acting agent was Ruth Webb. Wanted me to handle her for nightclubs. Anyway, so I just met the two of them. So I had them, and I knew Betty Garrett and Virginia O'Brien and Terry Moore, and I was able to get Sherry North. Adele Juergens hadn't been seen in 30 years. She drove down from Camarillo, which was a long drive, to be there. And Old Cape Cod was played in the show as part of the show. And I was handling Patti, so I invited Patti Page. I don't think she knew what she was coming to, but she came. And when Old Cape Cod started during the benefit, the audience just screamed and cheered, and she was like shocked. She didn't think they even knew who she was. Anyway, Gene Simmons was. We did a special midnight show. Everybody worked for nothing. And Gene Simmons came as a customer. She actually bought tickets and came. We had no idea she was even coming. And I had arranged to line up the ladies at the end during the curtain call and have them come out on stage. And Gene Simmons saw the line that I was setting up, and she got at the end of the line. And I yelled ahead to Betty Garrett. The matron was introducing them as they came out. And I yelled out to Betty Garrett, tell the matron, Lou Leonard, tell them that Gene Simmons is at the end of the line. It was an incredible night. It's Entertainment Tonight taped the whole thing, and they gave me the B-roll of that whole curtain call. So it's on YouTube. I was able to post it on YouTube. So that became the first AIDS benefit in Los Angeles, and it was covered that night live on the news because the show was at 12. So we had the 11 o'clock news live, including Robert Osborne, who was a local reporter then for Channel 11.
Yes, and God bless you. I mean, first of all, it was still a stigma for people were not even talking about it at that time.
No.
And God bless you, I mean, for putting it out there. Going back to your management, the first star that you managed, did you approach them or did they approach you? And how did you feel, based on everything that you had done to that point, that you were ready to take on that mantle, or did you feel that you were learning as you were going along?
Probably both. I didn't think of myself as a manager. I guess Anita O'Day might have been the first. This was back in '76.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing publicity for a restaurant called Hopper's down in the Village. It was a very large restaurant, large physically, and they had in the middle of it they had a kind of a petitioned off jazz room, and they were playing, not huge names, but fairly decent jazz names. Joe Williams and trying to think of some of the others. Demita Joe, Carmen McRae, and they had booked Anita in, and I lived nearby, and I had gone over there the day that Anita opened. I didn't know her, but I went over there for a business discussion with the owner about something, and she had been there rehearsing with her drummer John Poole, and they were sitting. I guess they had finished, and they were sitting at a table eating, or I guess eating, and this was in the afternoon. And otherwise, I wouldn't have talked to them, but they were sitting there. So I went over to them, introduced myself, and asked Anita, if she was willing to do any publicity, and she said yes. And I took an immediate liking to her. Then I saw her show that night, and quite honestly, I didn't really understand what she did, because I loved singers who sang the melody, which we used to joke about, because she doesn't sing the melody, or didn't. But I didn't quite understand what she did. I actually had to learn to appreciate what she was doing because it was so above my head. I didn't realize how brilliant she was and how difficult it was what she did. But I liked her as a person. And shortly after that, I was associate producer of a show called Timbuktu with Eartha Kitt.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on tour, and when we got to Los Angeles, we had a long run in Los Angeles, and Anita lived out there, and I booked her into the Studio One backlot, which was a cabaret room and a gay disco. Not quite the audience you would expect for Anita O'Day, but I thought it would be great to try and get a gay following for her, because I'd learned by then that all the big female stars had gay followings, that you really almost didn't become a major female star unless you had the gay following as well. So I convinced the managers there to let me book her into the backlot, and they did. And I just started booking her at different places, and she was becoming more and more successful, and I helped put her with George Eales, who wrote her autobiography. And she had been a long-time heroin addict. She was clean when I met her, but she had been on heroin for a long time, 16 years. And she didn't talk about it publicly. And suddenly she had to do these interviews where everybody was asking her about drugs. And she was very uncomfortable doing that, but she did it. We eventually got 60 Minutes and a lot of other big things. And her, I built her. When I first met her, she was working for $100 a night at little jazz joints in the Valley. And I was able to build her back up to a reputable career. And so I don't know what label you'd put on that, but I just love doing it. And
well, God bless you with everything that you've done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give away a prize to someone who's lucky enough to win something based on any of our guests that we've had in recent weeks. And I'm going to tell everyone how this is going to work. I'm going to bring up this window here. I'm going to bring this on screen. And we're going to, this is my homage to James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. I'm just going to give some random questions for you. The first question, I haven't even seen it. It's just a random question. And what's the best theater date that you've ever been on? Alan?
oh, you're talking to me?
Yes, to you.
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking for
No,
somebody.
I'm asking you.
Oh,
What's
okay.
the best theater date that you've ever been on?
Well, when I was first handling Carlton Carpenter was signed to do Boys in the Band to replace Kenneth Nelson as Michael. And Jimmy Coco, who was a client of mine, suggested to him that he hire a press agent and recommended me. So he did recommend me. And so I was doing his publicity. And then after a few weeks, Jimmy had conveniently had 4 tickets for an off-Broadway show. And he had a friend he was going with, and he suggested that Carlton and I go and use the other 2 tickets. So that was the first time I socialized with Carlton. And that led to us dating, quite honestly. I've never talked about this before. That led to us dating and eventually having a relationship. And so that night, I can't remember the show. I keep trying to remember what the show was. But I guess that was probably the most meaningful for me.
Well, God bless him, and God bless you. Who do you greatly admire in this business, and why?
Oh, gosh. You're talking about currently?
Any past or present?
Well, Charles certainly was one, Charles Lowe. Geraldine Fitzgerald had a huge influence on me. She was wonderful. I didn't talk about her before, but I had wonderful times with her. And her insights on just life in general were so astounding and just wonderful. Bette Midler in certain ways for her humanity. Charles Ludlam, we haven't talked about Charles. I was very close to Charles Ludlam, did his press for a long time. He stayed at my house when he would come out to California. Again, another brilliant, brilliant person. Mamie Van Doren in a lot of ways. I learned something from each of them. Lee Salters was not a nice man. He was very gruff and screamed a lot, and you couldn't really get close to him or feel comfortable with him because you never knew when he was going to suddenly explode. But I don't think there was ever a better press agent than Lee Salters, and I learned a lot from him. There are others. Harvey certainly was an influence. Oh, David Powers. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned David Powers. David Powers was one of the press agents who did theater with Harvey. And this is back when I was still working with Lee and Harvey. And I was still learning the business. And we worked until 6 o'clock. And every night at 6, David would still be at his desk. And I'd go in there and sit with him at his desk. And we would just talk. But he taught me a lot about how to handle a show and how to work with the stars of the show. He also taught me to get to know the entire cast, not just the star. And I did that when I actually started handling shows. I always did that. I always had something to do with the chorus people. I found ways to use them. Always tried to get something for everybody that was in the cast, not just the star. So I learned a little bit from everybody,
That's wonderful.
Yma Sumac taught me how to behave when somebody throws water in your face.
I listened to that interview earlier today. When do you feel, this is an interesting question, when were you most and least selfish in your career?
Least or most?
Both.
I guess least selfish when I was never money motivated. I did things that I wanted to do, or I would get ideas, and a lot of times I was never conventional, so my ideas were always kind of off the wall. And whenever I mentioned to somebody what I was trying to do, they would laugh at me because it seemed so ridiculous. When I first told people I was working with Yma Sumac or Mamie or Eartha Kitt, even none of these people had made their comebacks yet. So Ruth Brown, people thought I was nuts. Eartha is another one I learned so much from, and also Ruth Brown. Eartha was wonderful. Eartha, when I first started working with Eartha, I had a lot of preconceived notions based on what other people had said about her, and I expected her to be difficult or temperamental, and she was just the opposite. And I would tell that to people, and I guess something must have gotten back to her, because she called me into the dressing room, and she got very serious, and she said, "Don't ever defend me."
Oh, wow.
And I knew what she meant, and I didn't ever do that again. She wasn't mad at me. She just didn't want me sticking up for her because she knew she wasn't wrong, but she didn't care what people said. The point of that was I didn't work for the money, so I would just do the projects, and a lot of things that I was happiest doing didn't pay me. So I guess that's least appreciated. Is that the word you were using?
Yeah.
They appreciated me, so I don't know. It's hard to answer that.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you a question, and you don't need to mention a name because I'm all about celebrating, but who is the scariest person that you've ever encountered in this profession, and how did you deal with that person? And again, you don't have to mention a name.
I'd say Yma, because when I first met Yma, there was still all this mystery about her, and she was very hard to get close to, in a sense, until she trusted you. Eartha was that way too a little bit in the beginning, until they trusted you. They had like a wall. Yma was very formal. After I started working with her, she would tell me I had to present the first day of rehearsal with a new band. I'd have to present her to the musicians. This is Miss Sumac, and I would always have to call her Miss Sumac in public. In private, she was Parita. That was the nickname she liked. She was scary at first. Eartha was a little scary, intimidating. Tallulah Bankhead. Sophie Tucker. I'm really dating myself now, but Sophie Tucker at the very end.
Wow.
But you worked your way in, and I guess trust is the magic word. Once they trusted you, they would accept you. And the first time I saw Carol without her wig or makeup, I knew how intimate that was. And the same with Yma, the first time I saw her with no makeup. Eartha. once they let you see them without their makeup, you're in.
I know. I remember that the first time I saw Carol without her makeup, she came into the room. At the time she was married to Harry, and Harry said, "Honey, you don't have any makeup on," and she said, "Richard loves me the way I am. Don't you, Richard?"
Yeah. When I toured for a year with the best little whorehouse in Texas with Alexis Smith. And we were very close. We did a lot of, on the days off, she liked to do little trips. So we did a lot of fun little trips together. And, but when she was playing the Pantages here, I had booked her for an afternoon TV show, and she wanted to get made up at the theater by her own makeup and hair people. So I went to the theater to get her, and this theater was dark because it was closed. And I guess she had just arrived. Anyway, this person, I was heading towards the dressing room, and this person came over to me with a big smile and started talking to me. And I had no idea who I was talking to. I acted like I did, but I really had no idea who I was talking to. And then I realized it was Alexis.
That's great.
With no makeup on, not a stitch of makeup.
That is great.
It was like she had no face. I just saw this mouth smiling. I loved her. She was wonderful.
That's great. Wow. In what way did you come closest to your idea of perfection in your career? And I think everything about you is perfect. So for me,
thank you.
So that's great. But for your own sense of perfection.
It's hard to say. I had many thrilling moments, I remember Hadda Brooks was an 80-year-old African-American singer, pianist, and wonderfully talented. I'd never heard of her. Now, I knew every female singer there was in the world, but I'd never heard of Hadda Brooks. Richard Lamparski, who wrote the Whatever Became of books, told me about her. And I was booking a new jazz room at Perino's restaurant, and it was a little piano bar, and I kind of envisioned one of those older black women that plays and sings. So I thought of Hadda, and I'd never met her, but I called her, and I went down and met her downtown in LA. And I'd never heard her sing or play. I had no idea. She hadn't worked in 16 years. I had no idea if she was good or not, but I booked her, and the Times came opening night and gave her a rave review. She was a drinker, so her drinking problem was always in the way, kind of. She was basically an alcoholic, but when she was good, there was nobody better. When she was on, she would be sloppy other times. But despite all of that, I got her 2 recording contracts. I got her signed to Virgin Records. I had her playing the Viper Room to a young, hip, Sunset Strip crowd. Mm-hmm. And then my ultimate goal for her was the Algonquin, and she played the Algonquin twice. Wow. So I took this woman who hadn't worked in 16 years, who was an alcoholic, 80-year-old alcoholic, got her signed to Virgin Records, had her playing the Algonquin and the Viper Room. And I remember one night at the Viper Room, the audience that were a young audience, were just screaming and cheering for her. And I something kind of clicked in my head, and I just realized what we had achieved. Wow. That was a great satisfaction for me.
That's great. What do you feel is the most important action that you've ever taken in your career?
Oh, it's hard to say. Probably when I left the Salter's office. I left because of the Dorothy Lamour Lambertville engagement. She wanted it promoted in New York, in the New York papers, because that was the closest she was going to get to New York, as she said. Mm-hmm. David Merrick didn't want it promoted in New York because he thought it would hurt Pearl Bailey, mm-hmm. who was on Broadway then. Of course, nothing would hurt Pearl Bailey's show. I mean, I don't know why he thought that. But anyway, he forbid us to promote it in New York, and I was unhappy about a few things in the office anyway. And another office was trying to get me to go with them. So I kind of timed it to leave in time to promote Dorothy of Lambertville. And so leaving Salters was a big decision. That was really my first big decision in the business. And then I guess the next one would have been moving from New York to California. I always thought of New York and LA as the only two cities where you could have a national career. And I liked being in LA when I was there with Timbuktu and again with Whorehouse. And it was the living. The work was the same, actually. I just liked the living better. And so I made that move in '81. And I've always been happy out here. I still go back to New York occasionally if it's, for work, if I'm doing something. But the living is much better out here.
Well, maybe you've just answered this next question, but the next question is, what was the most difficult thing for you to give up in your career?
Money. I never had a lot of money. I'm inheriting a large estate from Carlton, but that's another issue, and I haven't gotten it yet. But I've always lived, and I've always managed to live, and I live fairly well. I have a beautiful house up in the hills in Glendale, and I still struggle with money, but I live on a higher level, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living better, but still, living from month to month financially. But I've loved my life. I've known great people, and I don't have any regrets about any of it.
That's wonderful. And when did you have the weakest self-confidence in your career?
Oh, I'm always, I'm never confident. I don't know. I've learned, I've had all of my thing. I'm not talking about earlier years where I was hired as a press agent. That's a whole different issue. But the projects that I've initiated and the people that I've sought out to work with have always started with an idea. I like originals. I like people who are originals, one of a kind. They don't copy anybody else, and whatever they do is unique to them, which is why I can represent a Mamie Van Doren and a Geraldine Fitzgerald at the same time, or the Rolling Stones and Dorothy Lamour, or Yma Sumac, or the Kid, Ruth Brown and LaVern Baker. They're all different, but they're all individuals. They're all originals, and that's what I love. People that, like I said, that aren't copying something else. Carol, of course, is like one of those unique people. Mm-hmm. But it all starts with an idea of what I could do with them. Like with Mamie, I didn't know what to do with a 50-year-old Mamie Van Doren. But as I said before, I knew that she had to have a gay following to be. Mm-hmm. When I met Mamie, it was in '83. Marilyn Monroe was already a gay icon, and Jane Mansfield was starting to become one. And I thought, here's Mamie, the third, the three M's. She was, still alive, still looks great. I should try and get her a gay following. So I got the idea to make her a disco star.
That's great.
Because I knew she could sing. She had actually been making some recordings for a little studio in Hollywood. And I said to the studio, let's do a dance record. And the person who had been writing the songs for her wasn't even that familiar with how to do a dance record, but he listened to several of them and he came up with a song called State of Turmoil. And I didn't know that much about any of that stuff either, about how you market a dance record or anything. But I had a friend who was a disc jockey at the Motherlode, a bar in West Hollywood, and he explained a lot of it to me. And, I said to the record company, we have to do a 12-inch dance record. They had no idea what I was talking about. But we did one, and it made the charts. And I booked Mamie into all the really raunchy discos back then, Probe in Hollywood, Trocadero Transfer in San Francisco, the Limelight in New York, back when the Limelight was like that movie.
Wow.
And then they made her Grand Marshal of the Gay Pride Parade in 1987.
That's great.
So all these ideas were different. Yma Sumac, everybody was different. They were all different from each other, but they were all special in their own way. And but then I had ideas that I never quite was able to do. And those are my regrets, because I think they could have been successful. While Doris Roberts was doing Everybody Loves Raymond, I had known her from her Terrence McNally days in New York. And I also knew Dick Van Patten from a Terrence McNally play that he had done. He was doing Eight is Enough on TV. So they were both TV stars at that point. And I got the idea to put two of Terrence's one-act plays together, Noon and Next, and starred Doris Roberts and Dick Van Patten, and they were both willing to do it. Mm-hmm. I contacted Terrence through his agent, and he told his agent, let him do whatever he wants, because I had once been Terrence's press agent. And then I went to the theater and wanted the theater, to let us do it. They were going to do equity waiver to let us do it there, and she said she read the plays and told me she didn't like them, and that the whole thing fell apart. But so I had Terrence's, okay, and I had Doris and Dick Van Patten both willing to work for nothing in an equity waiver show, and the woman that ran the theater didn't want to do it.
Wow.
So that really hurt me. I still, when I think about it, it gets me upset. Roberta Sherwood was somebody I loved, and I really wanted to do a comeback with her, and she started to get Alzheimer's, so we just weren't able to do it. But that was a regret. There have been a few others, but I always believed in my ideas, and when I know that something could work and then I'm not able to do it, that hurt. That's a regret, But I had a lot of things that were successful, so.
That's great. You sure have. When I use the word reverence in this business, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I'll say respect, because I never gave up being starstruck. So I got used to being with stars and being, when I say intimate, I don't mean sexually, but being intimate in their lives. But I never lost that starstruck quality. And all of the people I've worked with I respected. So I'll say respect, as a form of reverence. So I was comfortable being around Eartha Kitt or Carol or Yma Sumac or any of the others in a casual way, and as people, I was very comfortable dealing with them as people, but I never lost my reverence for them as stars, and I knew the difference. I could separate the two, but at the same time, I never lost that, and was always careful how I talked to them and treated them with respect, when I was with them. So I guess reverence in that form.
That's great. And this is my last question. Looking back, I've got a photograph I want to show here, if I can bring this up for just a moment. And little sleuthing here. Here. What would you say to this little kid?
You're going to be in show business when you grow up. I had no idea. This is when I first met Patti Page, and I was 13 here, and it was her birthday, so this would have been November of '57, and it was her birthday, and I didn't know what to get her, so I had a charm made of I forget what was on the charm, something with a wasn't a gold record. I can't remember what was on the charm, but that's what she's holding in her hand. I just given it to her for her birthday. And if you look on my lapel, I'm wearing a pin that says "I'm Batty" with an I. I'm Batty for Patti.
Well, Alan, I want to say I'm Batty for you. I'm going to get a pin that says that. I'm going to give away a prize right now. This is how it's done. I have nothing to do with it, so you'll see how this is done. We'll see who we're going to give the gift to in just a moment. Josh Ellis.
And my buddy.
Yes, mine too. Josh officiated my husband and mine's wedding. So how appropriate on Valentine's Day. Josh, call me in about half an hour and I'll tell you what you're going to win. That is, if you're available. So I'm going to pull this off right for a moment. And I've got a couple of closing remarks I want to say. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm sure I can speak for Alan when I say this. We don't take it for granted when you take the time to spend a little time with us. You could have been anywhere else, especially here on Valentine's Day. So thank you for being here. If this was your first time at Richard Skipper Celebrates, I hope it won't be your last. Please subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment here on Richard Skipper Celebrates. Please check out the other everyone else that I've celebrated. And also, please check out Alan's YouTube channel. It's the best. It's much more exciting with all respect to everyone that I've interviewed. There's so much there. It's so much fun. I spend hours and hours and hours on his site. When I can't sleep, I go to Alan's site. So that's the place to be. So thank you for being here. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list and reach out to the fifth name on the list and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. As my dear friend David Friedman always says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. So, Alan, I'm going to leave the screen and you've got the final word. Anything you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just anything you want to say to anyone who's watching, it's your final word. I want to thank you for all that you've done for all of us, for all that you've done for all of the celebrities that we all love, that you've taken care of them, that you've supported them, that you've put them on the pedestals that they belong on. So thank you for all of us. And thank you. And you belong on a pedestal too. You're always celebrating. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Richard.
Yours. Thank you.
I just want to say, follow your dream. It sounds corny, but that's it. That says it all. Anything's possible. I never had a single connection in show business at all. Everything I did was just my aspirations and following my dream. It sounds, well, it's not really corny. A lot of us take jobs, but Geraldine Fitzgerald, once said to me that the greatest thing you can have in life is to do something that you really love, that isn't just for the money, that isn't just a work job. And I've been lucky to have that my whole life. And that's basically it. Follow your dreams.